Hey, so this is the first lecture, and I'm going to do my very best to walk you through this. Um, let's start off with why measurement, right? Which is actually why are you taking this class? Because I'm a great person, and maybe you're taking it because you've heard that I'm a great person, but there really is a better idea or a better reason to take this class. So let's think about it this way. Imagine you are in your dream job. You are a social media manager for a flourishing tech company. Or wait, even better, you are a subcontractor or work for an agency that has been hired by a flourishing tech company, and they are paying you a lot of money for your social media expertise. And then your boss, your employer, walks in and says, but what are we getting for the $1,500 per week that we are paying you? If you say, well, it looks a lot better than your own social used to, or we got a lot of likes, or even, I think people really enjoy these posts, you're probably not going to keep the contract because that's not the sort of thing that a business owner cares about. A business owner cares about the return on investment, right? They want to show you that or you to show them that you are worth the money they are paying you. If a client is choosing between paying you, a professional, $1,500 a month for social media work for them, or hiring somebody out of high school that they can pay, $15 an hour for, 10 hours a month, right? You want to prove that it's worth hiring you. And to do that, you need to show your return on investment, right? Because if you can't show that you are making money for the company, you can't justify your budget, and you are the first thing cut when budgets have to be cut. So if you have two measurement outcomes, and the first person says, we got great engagement, exclamation point. And the second person says, social media drove 127 qualified leads worth approximately $45,000 in revenue. Guess who's going to get the contract? And the answer is the second person. And the second person is that was when we use a valid framework for measurement where we can show, right, how social media drove those qualified leads. It's not always easy, but it is what you are looking to do. It also impacts your reputation because if you can't measure, you can't prove impact. If you can't prove impact, you can't build a portfolio of wins. And if you can't build a portfolio, then you will not get promoted, right? Because former clients and employers will be asking, did this person move the needle? Your reputation rests on results, not activity. You want to say, I increased client revenue by X%, or I drove Y qualified leads, or I improved brand sentiment by Z numbers of points, not I posted a lot. And last but not least is your professional standing. Strategic communication used to be considered to be unmeasurable, right? Marketing was measurable. We could measure how much people sold. But strategic communication, branding, wasn't measurable, or people didn't think it was measurable. And as a result, the marketing department got all the money, the communication department didn't, because the communication department wasn't proving that it was worth it. However, now Organizations that we're going to be looking at, like PRSA and AMEC and other industry bodies, have established principles of measurement that separate professionals from people who don't know what they're doing. So you need to be able to speak the language of measurement. You need to understand frameworks and principles and best practices, or you won't be taken seriously as a PR professional. And you want to be taken seriously as a PR professional. So measurement is how you prove you're not just someone who, and I quote, posts on Instagram. It's how you prove that you are a strategic professional who drives business outcomes, which is why you will get hired. Now, before we can measure anything, we need to know what success looks like, and that requires objectives and KPIs. You've probably heard the acronym SMART Objectives, right? But we're going to think about it specifically as regards social media. So S is for specific, by which we mean you don't say increase engagement, but you say increase Instagram post engagement rate. Specifically, what are you moving? Measurable, include a number. I prefer percentages because percentages are just more accurate, but sometimes people like you to put both the number and a percentage in. I suppose the choice is yours. Achievable. You won't really know if something's achievable until you've worked in the company where you're trying to develop the SMART objectives for a bit. If they have a history, then you can tell what people have done before. You need to base this on benchmarks and resources. You need to not promise silly things that you will never make because people don't like you when you do that. It needs to be relevant. It needs to be tied to business goals because business goals matter. And we'll cover that in a second, but it's always about the money. And it needs to be time bound because if it's not time bound, how do we know when we stop measuring? How do we know when we say, yep, this is it? Did we succeed or did we fail? Because it always has to be a yes or no answer, success or failure. Examples, we have our vague objective, grow our social media presence. That doesn't mean anything. A better objective, a SMART objective, would be increase Instagram followers among local women ages 25 to 40 by 20% from 2,000 to 2,400 within 90 days by posting 3 times a week and running 2 targeted ad campaigns. Now, the last half of that, the things that you are doing, are actually tactics. You can decide whether or not you want to include those when you are writing your SMART objectives, but in general, the more information you put in a SMART objective, the better it is. Key performance indicators are the specific metrics that tell you if you are hitting your objective, right? So if your objective is increase sales, then you need a specific metric, and in the case of this class, a specific social media metric that indicates you're going to be increasing sales by 10%, right? So usually that's website clicks from social, right? It can be conversion rate or revenue from social traffic, but we usually measure revenue from social traffic via website clicks. But anyhow, those are KPIs, specific metrics that indicate that you are going to make your objective. We have common KPI categories, right? So if you're using a communication objective, and communication objectives deal with brand awareness and brand reputation, right? An awareness KPI would be reach, impressions, follower growth, and share of voice, right? Reach and impressions are a little bit interchangeable. Reach is a number that a medium will give you. They'll just tell you what their reach is, right? It's usually followers, and followers are followers. Impressions are opportunities to see how many people could possibly have seen that. And that is also usually what we mean by growth, by reach rather. Follower growth is obvious, more followers. And share of voice means that if there are 3 professors talking about how great they are, the number of times Professor Marsh is mentioned is my share of voice, right? Part of awareness is also engagement, right? So engagement I consider to be a little bit more accurate than reach impressions, because engagement means something actually happened. So we know somebody saw it. An opportunity to see doesn't mean that anyone's actual eyeballs were on it. But if someone liked something or commented or shared or saved, right, that all becomes the engagement rate, and that means there was a reaction to whatever you did on social media. Sentiment, I'm skipping conversion for a moment. Sentiment, right, is we're talking about brand awareness and brand reputation. Well, sentiment is brand reputation, positive versus negative mentions, and a brand sentiment score, the number of stars you get on Yelp. That's all sentiment. Conversion is impact, is business objectives, is things like sales. So link clicks, website traffic from social, and leads generated are KPIs for conversion. You need to pick the right KPIs. If your objective is brand awareness, track reach and impressions. If your objective is community building, track engagement and conversation. If your objective is sales, which is always your objective is sales, track clicks, conversions, and revenue, right? The important thing here is you don't need 47 different metrics. You need maybe 3 good KPIs. Every SMART objective needs at least 1 KPI, but 3 is a better idea. I've mentioned that business objectives trump everything, right? That's what we mean when we talk about aligning objective. CEOs and your boss and everybody else cares about business objectives. They care about sales, earnings, net profit, conversion, and impact. They care about things that involve money, because that's why businesses exist. Businesses exist to make money, and if they're not making money, they're not hiring it, right? And making money is a business objective. It is conversion. It is impact. Communication objectives, again, are brand awareness and brand reputation. And communication objectives must always support business objectives. You can't say to someone, well, people feel really great about our company, if there's no sales happening, because then the feeling great doesn't make any difference. The one exception might be a really huge company like Coca-Cola, where their market share is almost completely maxed out. So brand reputation, maybe you could tank sales, but I doubt it. Things, United Airlines can whack a passenger over the head, they still made money, right? In that case, a really terrible job on communication objectives did not harm the business objectives for very long, right? But still, nonetheless, for 99.9% of the businesses that you'll be dealing with, right, communication objectives must support business objectives. We have a hierarchy of value. That's sort of part of that whole business objectives, communication objectives support business objectives. Business objectives are the most important. Impact is greater than outcomes, and I'll explain that in a minute. Right? We will be using the AMEC integrated evaluation framework. We'll be using that in Module 2. They actually have a really nice interactive one, and we'll be playing with that. But in their integrated framework, they talk about inputs, activities, outputs, outtakes, outcomes, and impact. Inputs are the resources that you invest, right? How much money, how much time, how many people. Activities are what do you actually do? How many posts you make, right? How many campaigns are launched? Right? Outputs are the immediate results, reach, impressions, and engagement. Outtakes are how audiences respond, awareness, comprehension, and sentiment. Right? Outcomes, and most measurement starts with outcomes, right? Our clicks, signups, and purchases. Those are all business related activities. They are better than outputs. So reach, impressions, and engagement can be measured. It's actually really easy. Almost every platform hands you those numbers on a platter. They have a little, when you look at the analytics, there it is. It says reach, right? You need to translate that into outcomes, which are the clicks, the signups, and the purchases. But you then need to translate it into impact, which are long-term business results, revenue, brand equity, and market share. And that's the magic, because it's not easy to go from outtakes to impact. You have to do a fair amount of analysis and a little bit of magic to make that jump. So an output is, we got 10,000 impressions on Instagram. Woohoo! Outcome is 500 people click through the website and 23 of those purchased. And you can come up with a percentage that gives you your return on investment, right? So with the outcome, we're doing pretty well. And we can prove that we have value. But we want to push it to the next space, which is impact. You want to say social media drove $3,200 in revenue this month, a 15% increase. And when you can say things like that and be accurate and transparent about how you got that number, that's when you are really proving that strategic communication has value and that you are a metric-driven strategic communicator. You become the hero. In this module, we're also going to talk about the Barcelona Accords. I think I mentioned that communication measurement is reasonably new, meaning that in the time that I've been teaching, so probably in the last 15 years, is when measurement became something that people were really, really interested in. And it had a lot to do with the rise of social media. And as brands became interested in measurement, a group of organizations got together and created the Barcelona Accords, which are valid principles of measurement. Principles of measurement that are designed to be transparent so everybody knows what you're doing, and that they are frameworks that people have agreed make for good measurement. We have a presentation on the Barcelona Accords, which you need to watch after you've watched this awesome presentation. It's by AMEC, but I'm going to take you briefly through the 7 Barcelona Accords. So goal setting and measurement are fundamental. You can't measure without clear objectives. That's why we talked about SMART objectives. Measurement and evaluation identify outputs, outcomes, and impact. You measure the full chain, not just the easy metrics or what people call the vanity metrics. Likes are vanity metrics, right? It feels good, but what does it really mean? Did it mean you sold anything? Right? Outcomes and impact should be identified for stakeholders, society, and the organization. Who benefits matters, right? And how much value you are adding is important. This is new. Both qualitative and quantitative measurements are valuable. They used to stress quantitative measurement, and that's because prior to the Barcelona Accords, people only spoke about qualitative measurement, which is narrative, right? Where we know quantitative measurement is numbers. But as people have begun to embrace numbers, they wanted to add back the idea that you also want to talk about the narrative that you are presenting about the company, because ultimately that is what strategic communicators do. We form the narrative, we create the brand. Advertising value equivalents do not measure communication value. I'm not going to explain that to you because explaining to it makes it seem like it's okay, and it's just not okay. AMEC will talk about it in their presentation. Just don't do it. And if one of your bosses who's probably very elderly tries to talk about advertising value equivalents, you need to tactfully direct them in another direction. Right? Measurement and evaluation should be transparent, consistent, and valid. So everyone should be able to see how you came up with your numbers, that you come up with your numbers the same way every time, and that these numbers have some validity, that these numbers have generally indicated this sort of business outcome every time. That's what makes them valid, that there is research behind them. And lastly, measurement and evaluation should be ethical, yay, enforceable, and should drive continuous improvement. So, continuous improvement gets overused a lot, but the idea is that you can improve upon things that you measure. If you don't measure, how do you know how to improve? Or how do you know if something that you're doing is actually improving anything? To recap, measurement protects your budget, your reputation, and your professional standing. Measure. SMART objectives and aligned KPIs are non-negotiable. You have to have them. You have to understand them. If you don't understand SMART objectives, now is the time to figure it out. If you want to go over it with me, I want to go over it with you. You measure the full chain, inputs through impact, not just the easy vanity metrics. And industry standards separate professionals from hobbyists. You'll see that I tried to overwrite the graphic there because it gave me a little bicycle. I guess that's what Copilot thought hobbyists were indicated by. I put a little measuring tape in there because I thought it was, better. But anyhow, the idea is that you are a strategic communication professional if you can measure well. Thanks for listening. Watch the AMEC Barcelona 4.0 deck. It is important.